Hi, I'm Erika of the Knit Kind podcast and Grapefruit Gardenia Designs. I am recording today from a relocation setting. I am in, you can maybe hear birds. I have my microphone, so I'm going to try hard to speak at the right volume so that we can not ignore the background noise entirely, but not be completely distracted by it. So I am in a setting, I'm in my parents' cottage. Lucky me, on the island of Martha's Vineyard, where my son and I are hoping to stay the majority of the summer. I packed with me more things to design and knit than probably clothes to wear. And that was the most challenging part of this. So we're doing a little renovation at our home. And we also had already planned this to spend more time with my parents this summer. My dad was ill last summer and spent a long time in the hospital and rehab, and he is home and he's doing very well. So we thought we would make the most of this summer, and then it so happened that we also were doing a renovation at home, and it was nice to relocate. I think the two things that were the most stressful about temporarily relocating, I have never relocated for this long as an adult, and doing it as an adult and a knitwear designer, I was really for months thinking very intentionally about what I wanted to bring. But my design process is not necessarily that intentional. It's a little bit more inspirational and something I see and something I want. And so having to really pare down the yarn, obviously, number one, that I was going to bring, the tools, the books. So it was interesting. It was fun. It was a good exercise, and I, fingers crossed, that I did an adequate job. I did not bring any of my spinning, which would have been if I were on a pure individual vacation. I think that would have been wonderful to have, but I feel much more focused with this. So did I say yes, I did say we're on Martha's Vineyard, I think. I had one false start because of some very loud landscaping outside. So we're going to start over. We're going to hope we can go through, have a catch-up episode, show you my one whip that I've made progress on that is not my design, show you where I am with my vest design, which is almost in testing. So I'm very excited about that. And then also I wanted to talk a little bit about wool and purchasing in the summer, and especially if you're on a budget and you're looking for ways that you could have sweater quantities ready to go when you hit the fall festivals and pair them with some special yarns. I thought that would be a good topic for today. So thanks for joining me. As I said, Grapefruit Gardenia. You can find my designs on Ravelry, where my username is knittyelf40. It's my little secret there. I started knitting, really, I won't say again. I had very briefly learned as a child, but I really started knitting when I was 40. So it's my little secret. I guess in a way, this is my third career. I had a long career in nonprofit management. It started, well, I had one job before that, which was in educational consulting for a year for a company. And then I went to the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, where I started in visual archives, which is on the curatorial side of things, and I transitioned to advancement work or development work, corporate relations, fundraising, but spent almost 11 years at the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, and then I had a career in nonprofits. I trained to become a life coach. I had a son, and then so much change, and I became an independent knitwear designer. So that's the little catch up. If you have not, I don't even know if I've said all of that at any point, but that's who I am if this is the first vlog podcast you're tuning into. And I also, which I was thinking about recently, I don't talk a lot about this, but for about 15 years, while I had a professional career, I also designed jewelry. So I've always been interested in making arts, crafts, and I've just been thinking a little bit more about that lately as I think about my journey as a maker and what I have to offer people as I'm developing workshops and that type of thing. So today I am not wearing knitting. I think, as I said, in a rustic cottage. I don't have air conditioning. I have it in case of emergency, but we try not to use it here. We try to just let the air from the ocean come in. We're not right on the ocean, but we're a 5 to 10 minute walk, depending on where you want to go. And so it Historically, it cools down a lot at night. Climate change has changed that a little bit, but we do often get a nice breeze. So we are in these little gingerbread cottages. I might, not on this one, but sometime this summer, I will do a little podcast, maybe include some of the things that I've been thinking about for designing related to the gingerbread cottages where I'm living, so that you can see that, and where I grew up in the summers. So today, what am I wearing is not knitting, but it is something that I made. I kind of show you around a little bit. So this is ice dyeing. And when you first see it, if you don't know about ice dyeing, I think that, your first thought is that it's tie-dye. And it's not. It's a very different process. And it's so fun. And I did do tie-dye as a child, which I thought was super fun too. I actually have a picture of myself selling tie-dye at the same craft show that I've done since I was 5 or 6 years old. I'm now 47. So I've been doing it for 40 plus years, and have done many different things in it over the years. But ice dye is something that I learned after becoming a knitter. And the reason is Heather Best, I almost said Heather Jane. It is Heather Jane, but it's So Happy Jane Yarn, and she's an independent dyer. You're going to see more of her yarn in this episode and have seen it in previous ones. She, at one point, and she may still have this on her website, she offered a class online in ice dyeing. And I thought, oh, that sounds really fun and different. I'm going to try it. And so what ice dyeing is unlike tie dyeing, where you mix your vats of dye first and you're dipping in a liquid solution. For ice dyeing, you are taking whatever material you're dyeing on, you're doing pre-treatment to that material. So not only are you washing it to get any residual oils or anything like that from manufacturing out of it, also pre-shrinking it and getting it ready to take the dye. But you can do it with a treatment there where you use an additional wash that makes it so that it really vibrantly takes the dye. So you do that process first, and then you wet and you pre-soak with soda ash, whatever you're going to dye. Could be a garment, could be a bag, could be a tablecloth, could be anything. And then you are arranging it in a way that you're creating negative spaces, so essentially recesses within your material. So if you can see, there are some areas that are lighter here, right here. And so you're taking your material, you're scrunching it in a way that there is a lot of not predictable results, unpredictable results. And in other ways, though, you are doing some things that are intentional, where you want the dyes to work through and not work through certain areas. So you're scrunching up your material. You're doing it generally over something that is like a rack, or something that liquid will be able to go through, but your garment or your material will not go through. And then you're covering it in ice, or you can use snow. In my case, I was using ice. Depending on the size cubes, it's going to do different things. So you're covering it in ice. And then with proper gear, very important, if you're using acid dyes or dyes that you do not want to inhale. You don't want to inhale any dyes. You don't even want to inhale Kool-Aid, but certainly you want to be careful. So you're wearing protective gear, doing it outside if you can, and then you're actually sprinkling the dye over the top. You're distributing it in ways where, again, to some extent, you want certain colors to go in certain places, but to others you don't. And what happens with ice dyeing that is different from like an immersion bath dye is that the colors will fracture. Not all of them. Basically, when you have component colors that go into something, so for example, in this, some of the grays, well, actually, I think over on my shoulder, see this yellow here? So you will have some colors that will go in and they will fracture when they hit the ice into their component colors. So if you put them in an immersion bath and you stir it up, yes, maybe you can create a tonal yarn, for example, if you're hand dyeing. But the idea is more to get something, the idea of what you're able to do is to get something that's more consistently dyed, right? So it's not even necessarily tonal. Obviously there's things you can do to get it tonal as well, but this is completely different. This is like fracturing into the different component colors that's going to make something. So you'll put a gray in and suddenly you're getting certain blues out of it, or certain purples out of it, or even like a gold out of it. And that you really can't predict. So that's where you want to be not only careful and intentional, but you want to know what's going to happen when you put certain colors next to each other and they split into other colors, if that makes sense. So yes, this is a podcast about knitting, but also just about making in general, and things that are really fun to try when it's not necessarily your primary craft. Most of us are multi-craftual. Is that the right word? I don't know, but it sounds good. So that is what I'm wearing today. And I do sell a limited number of these. I have them at the craft show on Martha's Vineyard, which will be the first Saturday in August 3rd this year. I will have some. And then we'll see. If I do another batch this fall, then I might put them on my Etsy site. But right now I don't have any on my Etsy site. It's just in person, or you can reach out to me, see what I have. I have a few adult things. I have a lot of baby things. So my whip, that is knitting, and that is not my design, is my Thea Colman fog cutter. I've showed it to you a few times. I've been working on it in between my own designs. I am at the point where I am increasing. So this is the front, and it's got this kind of all over cable pattern that's on a reverse stockinette, as you will often see. And I am working it in the O wool, but not the balance. So it was designed in balance, which is wool cotton blend, and I'm using the full wool blend. O wool did shut down, and this was what I had an opportunity to buy from one of my local yarn shops, because aren't we so blessed in Greater Boston to have so many? And this was a color they had available in a sweater quantity, and I wanted to support them. So here I am with the front, and because I do some social knitting and go to another local yarn store. So the yarn is from Gather here in Cambridge. My local yarn shop in Weston, Massachusetts is called The Unruly Stitch, and I make it there whenever I can for Thursday night knit group. And so for that, I have learned my lesson. I bring the back of the sweater, because when I start talking and getting really into it, I don't want to think about what way my cable is going to go. And even though it's intuitive, I will inevitably mess it up and then have to rip back. So rather than waste time at social knitting, I have been knitting the back at the same time, basically. And what's really nice about that, so you can see that that is reverse stockinette on the back. It's got a longer ribbing. It's going to have a split hem. It's a pieced sweater. And the nice part is, kind of like knitting 2 socks at a time, I'm not going to have to finish the front and then knit the whole back. I'm going to be done with them. I'm at almost exactly the same spot. So I'm getting to the point now where bottom up, I've started a little bit lower to increase now, because, gosh, I want to say it is a drop shoulder, but I actually don't want to misspeak to that. I'm trying to remember in my head what it looks like. Essentially, I'm starting increases here. Yeah, and so it's going to go like right about here. I think it's going to get wider, but I think the cable pattern stays the same. And then it's a bit of a boat neck, but the notes she has in the pattern, you can make it wider or narrower depending on your preference. I made the sweater a little bit longer than the pattern, but not much, because I do think I looked at other people's projects, and I do really like how the sweater looks when it is either cropped, if you're a cropped sweater wearer, or not too long, not over the hips, because I liked how the style on that looked better, which means I'll probably be planning my outfits around my knitwear instead of my knitwear around my outfits. And that's fine. Happy to do that. So that is Fog Cutter by Thea Colman. Now what I thought I'd talk about is my vest. So my vest, that has been the long saga, is going to be called the Rosalind vest. And I don't know that I've said that at this to this point. So the Rosalind vest is going to be named after Rosalind from Shakespeare's As You Like It play. And how did I come up with that? Well, a few different ways. One is where I am now, Martha's Vineyard, is where I grew up coming in the summers. My father was in public education, so he had a second job, but his job was on Martha's Vineyard. And my mother's family had come to Martha's Vineyard for generations. I think we figured it out once that we're not in the same cottage by any means. That eventually went to a different part of the family and then was sold. But I think it was 5 or 6 generations that we knew that had been coming here. And Martha's Vineyard's a very unique place. If you don't know about it, you might have a stereotype in your mind and it might be completely wrong. Martha's Vineyard is bigger than most people think and more diverse than most people think. And that is racially, religious, backgrounds, economically. So like a lot of towns that are near the shore, there was a major working class here for a long time. And, things change. It is expensive to live here now, very much so. But, it used to be that a lot of people who were very middle class, humble people in New England and Massachusetts specifically would have summer cottages here. And it was not a big deal. It was not flying in on your private jet by any means. So we were fortunate. We had a smaller cottage when I was little. It sounds funny because, when I say small, I mean like thumbnail cottage. And now we have one that is more livable for a family of 4, say, which is what my family was growing up. So all that to say, my grandmother's cottage was named As You Like It, not spelled the same way, but that was the name of her cottage. She is the one who was my knitting inspiration. She taught me to knit, as I recall, just one day, and I don't know why, doing as many crafts as I did. I didn't continue it at that time, but I didn't. And she passed away when I was in high school, so she certainly wasn't alive when I was 40 and started knitting, or how many years now have I been designing? About 3. And so, never saw any of that, but I wanted to name the vest for her. So the prototype you've all seen. This is the prototype. It was very summery colors. These were colors, this is the back, that I purchased at the Wayland Winter Farmers Market Farm Fiber Days in 2023, I think. Designed it in 2023 in the spring. And long story short, which is what I am going to talk a little bit more about, had some challenges with grading. I hadn't graded before. I knew what it was. I also knew I could pay to have someone else do it. And I was encouraged by my partner in tech editing to learn it myself. And I did through a long and sometimes frustrating process. So what I ended up doing was, after designing this, I needed to find a yarn to then publish in. And that was a little bit of a journey as well. And I probably will talk about this more, but I did really fall in love. This was a Targhee yarn, and I did really fall in love with that. And if you haven't knitted with Targhee, it is more common in the Western United States than in the Eastern United States, at least in what I've seen. But there are some things about it that are like, this was is a bulky weight yarn. But it really, when you knit it, although there's no question it's bulky, there's also some things about it that are almost more like an Aran weight yarn. It's very light, and I really liked that. The other thing I liked, now this one's hand dyed. The next one I'm going to show you is not, but I did like how it took the dye. It's a very matted, or I always say, is it matted? Is it muted? I don't know, but it's a matte color. It kind of takes the dye in a way that is soft, muted, almost like if you're looking at the difference between a superwash and a non-superwash merino. That superwash, we know some hand dyers love it because of the way it takes the color, and the organic ones take the color much differently, and I would say that's more how the Targhee took this. So I loved the colors. They reminded me of the cottages, which again, maybe I'll insert a picture or two, but you'll see it's sort of that look that's like light and summery, and so that's why I thought it's my first garment. The connection to my grandmother, the As You Like It play, the Roslyn character is so strong that I loved that. And also there's some nuances of gender, as Rosalind disguises herself as Ganymede for the majority, I think, of the play, and how, you know, she uses traits that sometimes strong women to this day in 2024 are criticized for, that men are applauded for. So all of those things are what went into the vest. And the fact that I didn't talk about that it's Thorn Stitch on the bottom, I'm going to show you in the next one. So I don't keep showing the prototype. I want to show you, and there's going to be some adjustments to this one. So stick with me here. But the stitch on the bottom, this is called Thorn Stitch. And I've used this in some of my patterns before. And I love it particularly in a heavier weight yarn. And I haven't tried it a lot in lighter weight yarns, but there are some stitches that just really look great in a heavier weight yarn. So I used Thorn Stitch for the first time in my wind chill warning dicky and my wind chill warning beanie, I don't know what I called it, beanie, I think. And so I loved it. And you know, if you look at my designs, that one, I like to pair at least 2 colors together, sometimes more. 2, I often like to do designs where you can use a hand painted yarn, because how many times do we attend shows or go to local yarn stores and we have that one skein and then we go, yep, got the one beautiful skein, now what? And what I like to do is designs where you can, in this case, buy a vest quantity, right? But maybe it's a sweater quantity, a vest quantity, or multi skeins for your background or your main color, and you can use those hand painted yarns for a highlight, a pop, a contrast color. So that's a theme in a lot of my designs as well. And so the Thorn Stitch, the other way that ties back to the overall design and the theme, is that thorns are often used in literature, right? They are used as a symbol. They are about protection. And what I loved about this is that it's a band around the person wearing it of thorns. And there's sort of that feeling that it's like a way of being protected by this band of thorns that ties back in. So that's a little bit about the design, the inspiration, the name of it. Now what I want to go back to is the grading piece, and why in some ways, it's not that I've been working on this constantly for 1.5 years. I wouldn't probably be here talking to you if I did that. I would be in the funny farm, or I don't know if that's, anyway, that's probably an antiquated term that maybe I shouldn't be using. I would be someplace driving myself crazy. I couldn't do that. So I put it down, I picked it up, I worked on other collaborations, I worked on accessories, but in the back of my head the whole time, I knew I wanted to do this. And so when I first designed it, the armholes came deeper than they would if you were doing a sweater. If you were doing a sweater where you wanted a more traditional proper fit, and it was up in your armholes, or your arm size, the depth here. And so that worked, and I had increases only on right side rows, and I had graded it through, it's graded right now to about a 68-inch garment size. I'm looking at possibly grading it to a 72-inch garment size if possible. And what happened is, well, actually I'm going to show you on this one, even though this is a smaller size. So as I worked with my tech editing partner, we talked about some tweaks to it. We brought the arm size, or the armhole depth, up. And when we did that, it meant that whether you had a 28-inch bust or a 68-inch bust, I had a couple of inches here to take you from your upper bust measurement to your full bust measurement, or slightly below the full bust, which is where, we think of it here, and sometimes it's actually a little bit below the bottom of your armhole depth. And so when you're working with a finer yarn, it's more forgiving. Yes, stitch definition matters. Yes, these things still matter. But when you are working with a bulkier yarn, it is less forgiving in that you're really going to see every stitch and every leg. And so I went from a back where I had increases only on the right side to a situation where for the larger sizes, I needed to increase more than that. And that meant I had a few choices. I could, one, start the increases a little bit sooner, but as a general rule, you want to try to be sometimes within 20, only 20% of your armhole depth for your increases or decreases if you're going bottom up. You could go, it's going to depend on the design, right? And there are some where there's no question it's 50% or maybe even more, but it's a very different look. And so I could either bring it up a little. That wasn't going to solve it on its own. I could do increases on the right side and the wrong side. And when I first swatched in that wasn't my first preference. I could do increases and distribute them across the back. I could do increases and have multiple lines. So where you have, and actually I will show you because this one, I'm still going to go back and do this. So on this one on the front, it's darker, it's probably hard to see, but you can sort of see there's this increase line, and then over here, if you look closely, you might see this second increase line where they're really parallel to each other. And I thought after swatching everything, that's what I wanted. And so I wrote the pattern with that, and I happily went along in what I am going to publish in, which is Brooklyn Tweed Arbor Lodge, a Targhee yarn that is amazing. I talked about it a little bit in an earlier episode, but I didn't say that's what I was going to publish in. It is. And it is domestically sourced. It is scoured. Sorry if you heard the door. Scoured, spun, dyed, sold, designed, all in the United States. And here's what happened. Thought I had it all figured out, right? And can you see this? Maybe this doesn't bother you, but right here, do you see? It bothers me as a designer. Although it worked on the front, and to some extent, I also think that's this is designed for a person with a bust, and there are notes in the pattern about how you could potentially adjust that. But it is there in the sizes 7 to 10 or 7 to 11, if it ends up being, there are more stitches distributed on the front. There are not in the smaller sizes, but the increases are slightly different because it has a tailored shoulder. So if you can see, it's harder to see in this one, but this shoulder seam is going to drop down just below your shoulder to have that English tailored fit. And in the back, it wasn't doing it for me. It puckered a little bit, and I thought, nope, still not there. So these are the things that designers spend sometimes a lot of time on, that maybe if you are knitting and you're even thinking, I'm even sort of designing for myself, I'm following Ann Budd, or I'm following Amy Herzog. Do I have that? I have one of her books here. You're following those to do your size, and you think, what's the big deal about somebody grading it? It shouldn't be that big of a deal. But sometimes what works in one set of sizes doesn't work in another set of sizes. Mathematically, it works. On paper, it works. You could knit it and put it on and it's going to fit you. But is it going to have the same look? And so that's where I got stuck. And when I get stuck in something like that and it's not fun, that's not where I am in my design career. That's not what I'm doing. So I put it down. And then when you pick up a design that you haven't been working on for a while to start it again, it's almost like starting the process over. So I tried another thing. I swatched on a smaller size needle. That had to do with me wondering if the way that I knitted it might have improved. So I made this beautiful fabric. I do like it on the bigger needle, but I thought, I'm gonna try that and see where we are, see what my gauge is. And I did a lot of, and I actually have some other yarns too. I have a bag of swatches at home with not only the Arbor Lodge, but a handful of maybe 7 or 8 other yarns that are very comparable, because I know not everyone is going to knit it in what it's published in. And I wanted to see, with this general weight yarn, and you're using, let's say you're using a merino, let's say you're using you know, a non-breed specific wool, how is it going to look? And I knitted and I knitted and I looked at every swatch, and ultimately, I'll show you one other swatch I did. This is when I thought I cracked the code entirely, and I knitted the largest size. I knitted the entire back section with the shaping, and I thought, yep, this is it. And I think it's really subtle here, and this is not a wasted practice, because I will use this another time, I'm sure. I did increases here, and at first, I'm going to hold it up. I feel like you can't even see, so it looks like you've just got a single increase along here. But actually, you have these increases that stagger. Can you see them if I hold them up? Like, I'm pulling it so you can see them. See here? And then here. Okay, but if I'm not pulling on it, or if this is on someone's back, you're not going to see those. And what I did to get here, I used to do all my thinking in the shower and come out and have to write stuff down. Well, now I've been doing it in my exercise class. So I take a bar 3 class, which I highly recommend if you like diversity and doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that and getting a good workout in by the end. So I'm finding myself in class now looking at everyone's backs and trying to figure out, how could I put increases across that back so that it's going to look great on a person and similar on a person with a 28-inch bust and a 68-inch bust. And I thought that was going to be my answer until I realized I couldn't do it on the back and the front because of the number of stitches on the front. Also, when something is going like this over your bust, it's going to look different than when it's on your back. Are you still with me? And so anyway, I had tried both things. I had tried starting out and coming in. I had tried starting in and coming out. I was at the point where I was thinking, is this vest never going to get done? And then I decided again, let's once again try right side and wrong side increases. And I tweaked a few things about that. And that is what I went with. And it did a few things. It made it so that I could simplify the instructions for every size. I could simplify the pattern. Everybody could essentially be treated the same way in how the fabric was going to behave. Sure, it is a little bit different when you're a size 1 from when you're a size 10, because you just have to put a certain number of increases in that area. But it felt like the right path forward for the vest. And so now, here we are. I am in the very, very final stages of tech editing. My partner in tech editing is on her vacation. We both looked at it right beforehand to just say, okay, we're in a much better place. I'm looking a little bit at some of the straight lengths before the shaping to make sure that looks consistent. And then drum roll, by the end of July, if not mid-July, well, not mid-July because she won't be back from vacation to do a final blessing, but hopefully maybe the 3rd week of July, it will be ready for test editing. Oh my gosh, test knitting. I will be putting the call out through Yarn Pond. I will be looking to try to have people in every size range test knit for me. And if you're interested in doing that in the Arbor Lodge from Brooklyn Tweed, we'll be working there to make that a little bit more accessible price-wise as well. So reach out to me if you're interested. And if you follow me on Grapefruit Gardenia on Instagram, I'll put the test call out there. It'll be out through Yarn Pond. It is a fast knit in as much as any knitting is fast. Like I said, it is a bulky weight yarn and it's a vest. There's no sleeves, yay. So I think it's a great piece. It's gonna be a great layering piece for fall. Kind of joking, but also not joking, that if I can get it published in time, this is something that you could knit in a week or 2 and have as your Rhinebeck sweater if you're going and you want to have a Rhinebeck sweater. And I hope it's really enjoyable. I have put blood, sweat, and tears into it. A lot of love, a lot of intention, and everything about it I love. So I knew I was going to be taking out that section that I told you about because I want that one to be my sample, and I want to be able to wear it and do some photos in it myself. And in the meantime, what I decided to do is another one with the new shaping. So I'm going to show you the new shaping on this one. This is in the So Happy Jane yarn that I mentioned. And she dyed this one for me. It was her September, oh my gosh, it might have been 2022. September 2022 or September 2023. I think it was September 2022. It's really scary when I'm losing track of years. It was her club colorway. Now I got her club colors in the DK weight yarn. And when she was doing a custom dye batch and you could request any of the colors, I asked her if she had her bulky weight available. Because she has a Scrumptious bulky that is a 3-ply. I think I'm going to take it apart and just tell you right now. Yes, it's a 3-ply. And there are a lot of bulky weight yarns out there that are hand dyed that are 2-ply. You don't see a lot of hand dyed 3 or more ply bulky weight yarns. And I loved the color green. So this is how this is coming with the new shaping. It is not blocked yet. So you can see the front shaping, you can see the back shaping. Now if I just let it go, you're going to see the front, when it is shaped on the front and the back, you know, it is not quite as smooth, but once this is blocked, it's going to be smooth. And this will be another one to show off hand dye. This one is merino versus Targhee. But I think it's great to have different examples to show different price points of yarn. And, you know, anything we can do to support the yarn industry and independent designers, independent dyers, companies that are socially responsible, that are ethically sourcing, that are producing in a way that is really meaningful for the wool industry, like Brooklyn Tweed is. So you'll have a few different looks, right? You can do, I just love how traditional and classic and classy these colors are together. This is knapsack and klimt. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think. I had to go back and remember for a second, but I mean, the navy and gold. Isn't that beautiful? And they have just been wonderful to work with as I've been trying to get this tweaked so that, you know, size inclusivity is so important. So I talked quite a bit about that, but I want to also do a little bit of an addendum on talking about size inclusivity. And I want to tell you one more thing about the pattern. This is going long. Size inclusivity is something that is going to continue to evolve because I think in some cases we've already dropped the word size, right? So the way you think about inclusivity, and we hold ourselves, many of us in the knitting industry, in the independent designing of patterns, to a really high standard. So the first thing I'd like to say is that I think it's important to think about portfolios that are inclusive. If someone has a design and that design, for whatever reason, is not as inclusive as we would like. One, we know that as the years go by, the expectations for what is size inclusive continues to change as bodies continue to change. We also know that there's a lot happening with gender, and there's a lot happening with people's health. So whether you are female, whether you have a bust, don't have a bust, maybe you've had a medical situation and you don't have a bust, maybe you are just naturally shaped differently. We know more people are doing designs where you're choosing by a cup size. Maybe you have had a gender transition and you are wearing undergarments that are shaping your body differently. Maybe you are male without a bust and you want to wear this design. Maybe you are male and you have more volume on the front of your body. So we cannot design a pattern that can be perfect for everyone just as it is written exactly. without the knitter also meeting the pattern part way and understanding their body. I always had to knit, almost every sweater that I knitted before I started designing, and since, obviously, I look at the chest size and I look at the upper arm size. And most of them, hadn't been going by like an upper bust, but we know now too that a lot of people are now using an upper bust measurement. Well, there were sweaters where I knitted a size 2 for the body and a size 5 or 6 for the arm. And so it wasn't that the pattern wasn't inclusive. It was that the pattern used standards, which are best guess estimates at averages of if someone has this size bust, what size arm do they have? Well, I don't. It's not the pattern's fault. So I learned with the help of pattern designers and support teams and my local yarn store and friends who knit how to modify different constructions. You don't modify every construction the same way. A yoke, you would potentially cast on either smaller and increase faster, or you'd cast on for a larger size. And when you separate it, if you can hear sneezing, it's my kitty. When you separate for the sleeves, you'd allocate more of your stitches toward the sleeve than toward the body, right? There are different ways to look at if you're doing like a bottom up or a top down and you're doing a drop shoulder, you are going to leave more room here for your arm side. It's just like if you want to make a body longer, you're knitting longer, right? So if we want the patterns to fit the best that they can, and we want the designers to make the patterns as inclusive as they can, we also are part of that process as knitters in learning through books, whether it's, I mentioned Ann Budd and Amy Herzog, and there are so many now. There are so many designers who do much more with size inclusivity, bust darts, other things. If we learn that, then we end up with knitting portfolios out in the world that are inclusive. And I think that's really ultimately what we all want. Yes, we want every pattern to be accessible to every person as much as possible. And we also want a world of inclusive patterns as much as possible. So I hope that, even though I spoke longer than I expected today, I hope that some of what I shared helps you understand that sometimes it's not just a matter of one more column on the spreadsheet, because as bust sizes change, as girths change, as arms change, things like shoulder drops don't change. Necks change, not as rapidly as the bust is changing. So it's not just a matter of multiply it by one more digit. It's not how the grading works. And there are so many great courses and reference books, and I might do a little inventory for you at some point of all the different things that I use to look into it. There's not just one master place you go and find this list and these are the measurements you use and boom, your pattern fits it and you're done. And even amongst experts, they have done different surveys. And, Europe and the United States and Canada and Asia and South America, bodies are different in different ways, right? So there's a lot that goes into size inclusivity. And I encourage you to learn more about it, especially if you want to have a dialogue where you are giving constructive feedback to designers. The more that you know, and the more that you ask, and you ask open-ended questions. Going back to this being a knit kind podcast, let's try to help each other and lift each other up instead of tearing each other down about things, especially when people are trying their best and they're trying their best in the moment, which isn't the same as it's going to be 5 years from now. So if you're critiquing a pattern that's 5 years old or 10 years old, remember that as well. Things change. I was going to talk a little bit about, if anybody was staying tuned for that, let me finish with that thought, and I'll talk more about it when it comes time to talk about yarn and yarn substitutions for my patterns. But it is the time of year where there are a lot of summer sales. Now, I always encourage people, if you can afford yarn that is ethically sourced, that is local, whether it's hand dyed or produced on a farm in your region, these are things that there's a reason we pay a premium for. It is an investment in our world. It is an investment in our craft. It is an investment in artisans and local yarn shops, in everything that we love. So I encourage you that if financially you can, when those opportunities exist, you consider it an investment. I also recognize yarn can be really expensive. Patterns can be expensive. Most of the time they are not they are not expensive for what you're getting. I know people talk about sewing patterns being so much more expensive. Many of us designers, especially when you're newer, we are often trying to cover our tech editing costs. So if you're looking for a pattern, remember that there's value in a pattern that's been professionally tech edited and tested, and those things all cost money. But I also recognize, as I was saying, that financially, not everyone, one, can afford that. And there should be no judgment to each other as makers or people about what you can and can't afford. And also how you choose to spend your money, even if you can afford something. So do know that it doesn't mean you have to go buy big box acrylic and that's all you can knit with. You can knit with wool. I don't know every single carbon footprint and ethical practice of every single company. And as I've said before, as the knitter and consumer, if you want to know those things, that's your responsibility to look into them. But I want to remind you that companies like Knit Picks do have eco wool, and they do have high desert. And those are two yarns. Right now I was looking, and some of the eco wool you can get for as little as $5.99 a skein. I mean, you're not going to do better than that at a big box store, even with acrylic most of the time. So look at sites like that during their summer sales. They might have 20, 30, 40, 50, 60% off. I mentioned Knit Picks, I mentioned Barocco. You know, Barocco, one, you can get it and still support a lot of your local yarn shops. They are based in Rhode Island and they are everywhere. You can also order directly from them. One of our local yarn shops in Massachusetts is Webs, which is yarn.com. You can get an additional discount when you buy a sweater quantity volume there. So, you know, again, I encourage you to invest your money where you can. It's really important to support things that are local, to support things that support us as a culture, as a community, as a human race. But there are also other opportunities. I hope that I've given you a couple to look at. I hope that you understand it's about inclusivity. As much as we are looking at size inclusivity, we're also looking at economic inclusivity. And I want to encourage you to find those other opportunities. I hope that was a good catch up. I hope you are having a wonderful summer. If you are, especially if you're in New England, this is the time of year that we all really treasure, I think. I hope you're, and I know our world continues to be a heavy place, right? I have done this whole podcast and not thought about it. So that's probably good. That's probably healthy for my mental health and my emotional health. But there is some stuff going on in the world and in our country that never thought we'd see. I tend to be a really involved person and not want to complain about things if I'm not going to do something about them. It's been a challenging year. I will just leave it at that. But, you know, there's also the part of me that is the endless, hopeless, optimistic. I think got to function that way sometimes. And above all else, I just think, you know, be kind to people, please. Gosh, it's endless when people cannot be kind to each other. And talk to each other. If you have something you need to talk through with people, talk to each other, you know, and let's all knit. Let's all knit kindly and live kindly. And I will just say until next time, thanks for watching.